Hello, everyone, and welcome to the week ahead. We have a full moon this week, and it's not any full moon. It is a full moon in the Gemini Sagittarius axis. So, for all of you Gemini moons out there or Sag suns out there, I know I'm a Gemini moon, and a lot of other astrologers are. It's really, I think, one of the most common moons that I find amongst astrologers. Um, this full moon is activating that Gemini Sagittarius polarity. In addition, it's going to be activating the Virgo Pisces axis, which is the natural square to Gemini and Sag. And I want to talk a little bit about, these particular signatures, because a couple of things I've been really noticing. Let's just see here. The full moon is a phase which we would consider the opposition, right? It's the sun in Sagittarius, right? And Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It's ruled by Jupiter. It reflects our deep need for authenticity, for freedom. It's in being ruled by Jupiter, it's really encourages us to find the truth, right? And truth, there's kind of, there's like truth as personal opinion, there's subjective, like what is true. Um, then there's like truth with a capital T. And I would say truth with a capital T is universal truth. It can apply to anyone and everyone universally, and it doesn't change. It's rare for us to find things that are truth with a capital T. Most of us are finding, truth from authentic um, experience, direct experience, right? It's like if somebody describes to you what it's like to meditate, and they say, oh, yeah, it's like you are paying attention to your breath, or you'll notice your mind is having lots of thoughts. You're trying to stay focused in the present moment versus actually sitting in meditation and seeing what happens for you. One is based on direct experience, and the other is based on information or knowledge that's being told to you, but doesn't necessarily actually equate. And that's kind of like the Gemini Sagittarius axis. We can get lots of information. We can have lots of different thoughts about things. There can be many different perspectives, many different ideas. And those differences are different from the direct experience of authentically having the journey, the experience itself, right? And as we are building towards this full moon this week, we have the rulers of the full moon in their opposite signs. This is what's called mutual reception in astrology. So the mutual reception is between Mercury, who's currently retrograde in Sagittarius, opposite Jupiter, who is currently retrograde in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So they're in each other's signs, meaning they're both working together. And in a way, I would say they're working against one another, right? And not against one another in a necessarily combative way, although if I were going into this week, I would say, be careful of getting too caught up in philosophical debate or argument. Be careful of getting too stuck on the past and past conditions and past behaviors that you don't actually see what's happening in the present. And that's something for us to be aware of all the time, right? Because so much of our like I've been studying this modality of co-counseling for the last year and a half, and they talk about recordings, right? That distress happens when we're very young. Those distresses aren't given a natural space to discharge, right? A child has a traumatic experience, and that trauma can be as simply as my mommy or daddy left me in the room and I was crying by myself, right? And so the distress recording becomes, I'm always alone. Nobody loves me. And that distress recording from whatever that experience was, maybe mommy and daddy had to go outside for one moment, but you all of a sudden realized that you were alone and it imprinted in your consciousness, I'm always alone. Nobody loves me. And that imprinting then gets repeated when the boyfriend in high school leaves and goes with the cool girl, and then the job that you were longing for gets taken by somebody who's more qualified. And then the husband, is, in a situation that ends up being untrue, and you discover that he's been lying and living a duplicit life, and you're devastated, right? And so all these repeated experience continue to trigger the original distress recording of I am all alone and nobody loves me. And these particular retrogrades, as well as the intensification energy of a full moon, are meant to accelerate the soul's growth. And what is the growth, really? It is for us to replace the recording, replace the suffering, replace the messages that we've received from so young, from all different directions about who we are, about what we are, about how we should be, about how we should live, with something that's actually true, true with a capital T, right? And my perspective is really, if love isn't the bottom line, if unconditional love, as the divine created us to love, isn't the bottom line, then it isn't truth with a capital T, right? If that's just my own perspective. If it doesn't come back to love, if it doesn't come back to our soul and to the nature of our loving selves, if it doesn't come back to forgiveness, returning us to love, then it's probably, either that subjective truth or a little t truth, which isn't to diminish the value of those, realizations or that information. But if it's, and anything else is in general some aspect of these original distress recordings, right? And those distress recordings, like tapes that play again and again, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved, I'm alone, nobody cares about me, nobody wants me, for me, these are the devastating things that operate on a subterranean level, eroding the foundation of our relationship, both with our source, with our gifts, with our love, with who we are meant to be in the world, how we're meant to creatively actualize. So when we are moving towards this full moon, we can notice maybe what messages are coming to the surface, and including those messages that are lies, right? Including those messages that are untrue, and including those messages that are subjective truths. If you test it against the litmus test of, is this universal and does it come back to love? And the answer is no, then it's probably something that needs further investigation, right? You need more information. And a lot of the times with these Mercury retrogrades, especially, we do need more information, right? We do need to gather the pieces. Like I got called today on something that I'm working on, and I thought for my own purposes that everything they needed was submitted except for one document. And she says, oh, actually, no, we need all the documents, and here's the list of them, right? More information is needed. And a part of what helps us to resolve issues in our life is that gathering of more information. What is it that actually we are doing that is true for us, that is authentic for us, that is our part of our soul's calling, right? And I do think that Jupiter invites us to that authentic truth, right? But while Jupiter's in Gemini, being ruled by Mercury, and we're going to see this for a while now, Jupiter's about at the midpoint of the retrograde cycle, and it will be next year. in 2025 when Jupiter moves into Cancer. So while Jupiter is in Gemini, right, this is an amazing time to grow if you are a writer or a teacher, if there's, you know, if there is work that you have to do, right? And this particular time of the year is a really great time for editing, for refining, for coming to understand what's the vision here. What is it that we are doing? Without that vision, it's very hard to direct our lives, right? And we can know this about any aspect of our lives, right? We can be kind of thrown by the will of the world. We can be controlled by the mechanisms of um, capitalism and consumption, or by even our simple habits and patterns. We can be controlled by those original narratives. I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. I'm always alone, right? And as those original narratives have been taking root in our life, they're there eroding through our thoughts, the way that we feel about ourselves, the way that we think about our world, the way that we think about our life. And a part of what's been happening as these planets are retrograde, Mercury and Jupiter, we've just recently had Mars station retrograde. And I did a little video on the Mars retrograde cycle just so you could understand kind of the larger, and Mars is the lower octave of Pluto. It is that desire nature, it is the will, our drive. And it's ruling the North Node in Aries, which says that I will do what I want. But at this point in time, Mars is retrograde, which is really inviting us to reconsider, what do you want? Because if you do what you want and you do what you will get what you get. And often that is consequences, especially if we're doing things that are haphazard, right? You know, I have noticed quite a few times this week things have caught fire, which was really interesting to notice. And as that's happening, I'm like, oh, okay. You have to be really careful. You have to really understand, just like you would teach a child from the very beginning, how it's dangerous, how fire is wonderful, it's powerful, it can warm us and it can destroy, and I live in Northern California where there's been immense devastation from the fires that have come through this area. Um, Not so much recently, but there's always that risk, especially during the dry and windy season, right? And I always light a little candle before I record the week ahead. And I looked up at the candle behind me, and the plastic that the candle was sitting in was burning. Like, I've never seen that plastic catch on fire. It totally surprised me, but it also made me aware, okay, this is something to be careful with. This is not to take for granted that the little container that the candle can come in isn't flammable. I don't know why they would do that, but needless to say, that's what happened, right? That's kind of the difference between, in a sense, our direct experience and the challenge of redefining our will in a way. Because so often we will reference the past, we will reference those recordings, we will reference, what we've been able to do as opposed to what we truly desire to do. And this Mars retrograde is going to go all the way back to the sign of Cancer, which will bring us into that immense vulnerability, that challenge that we face when we're trying to feel our way through emotionally, but we don't yet have the words or the capacities to articulate our desires, right? Emotional, it's, for example, like anger is kind of the surface level emotion. We will feel angry before we are able to recognize that we feel hurt. That's a great way of describing, Mars and Cancer, right? There's going to be a feeling sense. And if we focus on feeling angry, we won't actually get to the vulnerability, which is, why are we feeling hurt? Where do we feel like we weren't cared for? Where do we feel like we weren't nourished and protected? And with Mars in Leo right now, opposing Pluto, where do we feel like we have creative energy, life force energy, desires, maybe romantic desires, maybe desires for a more passionate way of living, maybe desires for more love and heart in our life, but where we feel stifled and disempowered and held back by limitations, whether they are external limitations, things that we're facing in the world, or whether that it's that internal distress recording, right? Whether it's that internal narrative, the inner limits that we reach where we say, oh, why bother trying to meet someone because I'm always alone and nobody loves me, nobody wants me, why feel good about taking care of myself because I'm not worthy of care. Everyone else is worthy of my care, but I'm not worthy of caring for myself, right? We have to overcome these messages. And I think a part of what happens in the retrograde cycle is that we get to see them fully. They become exaggerated and intensified. The things that we've kind of kept under the surface that we've tried not to fix or not to resolve become broken to a point where we cannot ignore them. They become callings of our soul to the point where it's like, oh, that has to be resolved. Oh, that I can't stand that any longer. I need something to change. And it's in those moments of, desiring change, especially that we become capable, in a way, of actually changing, right? That we kind of break free from our own limitations and we just get to a point where the will to change and the courage to change and the capacity to change all meet one another in the same room. And that is a beautiful, from my perspective, that's like a beautiful moment. Those moments are always humbling for me. um, they often come with a shred of grace, just like lining the whole experience. Because something I couldn't do for myself all of a sudden is done for me. Like I've had all kinds of addictions in my life where I was never really able to let go. And it's generally that place of pain where the pain becomes too great. It's that place of struggle and suffering where I just realize that no matter what I'm trying to do, I can't seem to do this myself. It's that lack of control where it's like I feel powerless in this situation. I've been dealing with my toddler, my 2-year-old, who's adjusting to a new baby in our home. And her responses to that have been so challenging. And at the same time, I have such a deep desire in my heart to meet her with compassion, with kindness, with gentleness. And I'm also, underslept and undernourished and under all the things, in taking care of a newborn. And it meets that part of me that desires to change so bad, but yet feels powerless to do anything beyond what I continue to reactively do, which is more of a survival mechanism as opposed to being a way that I'm like actually feel empowered as a mother and I'm thriving and I'm caring for my child in the way that I want to, right? It's those kinds of experiences that stir us so deeply and push us to a place of what Jeffrey Wolf Green calls, with the opposition, the evolutionary bridge. We have to cross over. We have to do something. And that, for me, while we're in this mutable season, can encompass any and all area of our life. I talked last week about the grand fire trine with the North Node. You know, it's it's so much of our passion and our will and our desire to live gets wrapped up in our basic survival needs, gets wrapped up in our basic belief systems, gets wrapped up in our limited ideas about ourselves, gets wrapped up in the pain and suffering and struggle that we're in. And imagine a ball of twine that just keeps getting more and more entangled. A part of what we are trying to do is tease apart what needs to be rethought, redone, reevaluated in our life so that we can begin anew, right? We're at the opposition. The full moon is halfway between the new moon, which is a seed of a cycle, the new beginning of an evolutionary phase. And so we're at this, it's not a culmination so much as it is a movement towards an evolution. And that movement impels us to change our thinking. It impels us to change our direction. One moment while I pause this. Anyhow, I'm saying impelling us to change directions, right? And spontaneously a baby appears. And so here we are. Um, and Jupiter actually is quite, the spontaneous, Mercury as well, the trickster, right? And Uranus is in the mix with all of this. Uranus is also retrograde, and of course rules Aquarius, which is where we have Pluto and Venus and Ceres moving at this time. And so that kind of flexibility of mind, actually, to be able to spontaneously change direction, to be able to contradict our routine and our habits, is the very same flexibility that allows us to change as people, as human beings, and actualize and evolve in ways that we haven't been able to do, right? So we can be grateful for that kind of spontaneous evolution, and it becomes a way that we get to liberate ourselves from patterns where we've been stuck. It's like, okay, I noticed that thought, that recording, that I'm not good enough, nobody loves me, I'm all alone. Where can I notice that that's contradicted in my life? Where can I notice that that's actually not true? Are there people who love me? Are there people who are around me who want to be with me? Are there people who demonstrate to me in my life that I'm good enough just the way that we are, right? And we might have to look for evidence of that in things that we haven't necessarily found. And if, God forbid, you find yourself looking for evidence of that and not finding it, you might have to look inside, or I would say to our creator, for a perspective that is different from the one that we've been given from the outside world, for a perspective that actually shares the truth of unconditional love, that it doesn't matter that that recording is so strong, because the truth is always true and love is the truth. So if that's the bottom line, then where have I been mistaken about myself or about others? Where can I offer myself compassion, grace, forgiveness? Where can I be more open-minded in what I'm looking at for myself or my life, my vision, and actually see that it's possible? Most of us want something like the New York Times best-selling book, and a six-figure book deal and all it's like, if to want that is great, and maybe there are plenty of people who have done that. But if you're not willing to take your pen to your paper or an hour to begin writing, if you stop yourself at that stage of evolution, if you say, oh, who am I to say anything wise or useful to others? You will never know the actualization of anything beyond where you have been, which is what continues to keep most of us stuck in some form of the past, right? It's not always the case, but sometimes that's what happens. We end up repeating relationship patterns. We get into a new relationship and it's like, oh, all of a sudden I realize this guy is very familiar. Why is he familiar? Because he's the same as that guy, or this relationship with this woman is, oh, that feels familiar. Why is that the same? Oh, it's like that's how my mother treated me. You know, however it works out, the soul will continue to repeat lessons until those lessons are resolved. We talk about this when we're talking about planets squaring the nodes, where a, a planet, let's say any planet in particular, is in a square to the nodal axis here in the natal chart. If we're born with that, we're here resolving a very core evolutionary dynamic. And Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about there's a resolution node, right? That's where in order to resolve that dynamic, we need to lean into that. But what often happens is that the past dynamic, the way that it has been, is a very strong pull. It's like a muscle that's been overworked. And in order for us to release from that muscle and start building something new, we actually have to completely release from that pattern and focus on developing the other muscle. It's like if I were to go to the gym and only work out my left arm all the time, every day I'm there just working out my left bicep, and my left bicep becomes very strong. And then all of a sudden, people are asking me to carry things with my right arm. I would have a really hard time doing that because there was no strength training given to the other side. This is one of those times where we're being called to start to release from a pattern of the past in order to actually begin to actualize something new. And yet the past is going to be the more familiar, the more strong, the more reinforced narrative, the more anyway, that's enough words for it. You get what I'm saying. So that's the big news of this week ahead. We have this full moon, and then we work our way from the full moon into a Cancer moon, followed by moon opposite Pluto on Tuesday into Wednesday. And the Pluto opposition also comes with a Mars moon conjunction on Wednesday. And then we have a Venus opposition of the moon on Thursday, right? These can be very creatively catalyzing days. We've got a lot of planets in fire and air signs. We've got Mercury, which is stationing direct at this time this week. So if there have been things that have been kind of unresolved during the week, especially Mercury issues, Mercury Sag issues, things breaking down, things that have been kind of difficult to get clarity on, clarity may be very well coming. And not only coming, but coming swiftly in a sense that once we really get, oh, this is what I really want. This is the thing. I've been hanging on to this thing because I thought this was what I want. Or I've been hanging on to this thought that says that I can't have what I want, that I can't live the way, like if I want a deeply loving, fulfilling, intimate relationship with marriage, and I want to have healthy communication, and I want to have, total devotional commitment. But the inner programming is that, my parents are divorced, relationships are toxic, communication is challenging. I can never get what I want. I can never get my needs met. I have to get through all that muckety muck in order to get to even the perspective that it might be possible to have a loving, healthy, intimate, connected marriage and relationship. I have to get through all that past evidence, which might say that like that didn't work out. Look, see what they did. Look, see how that turned out. Look, that, divorce happens. That's just what I'm never, and one of the things I heard yesterday when Patricia Walsh was teaching unresolved karmic contact from, she did a class for the EA online conference that we hosted for the Jeffrey Wolf Green Association of Evolutionary Astrologers. And in that, she talked about karmic complexes, where the things that always happen, or the things that never happen, right? These are karmic complexes that repeat themselves, often from past lifetimes, but I don't even think you have to believe in past lifetimes. Enough to say that, like, oh, the things that we say, oh, this always happens, this never happens to me, right? Those are repeating patterns, we could just say simply. And in order for us to break free from them, we have to resolve them. We actually have to meet them fully. We have to be able to say, oh, that was an experience that I had as a child. That was a belief that got ingrained in me, but it no longer needs to be true. However, there has to be a finding our way out of that. And I think one way out of it is through creative life force, creative energy, through unique expression, through telling your story, through exhausting the feelings of the past so that they can be felt, right? That's Cancer moon comes before Leo, right? Emotional processing has to come before self-expression. We have to really tap into the emotional body before self-expression then can feel safe to actually be expressed. This is similar to the way Scorpio comes before Sagittarius, right? We have to go through a deep transformation before new belief systems can take root in our lives. In the same way, this is why Capricorn comes before Aquarius, right? The status quo and the way things are and have been conditioned to be comes before the liberation that changes all things in ways that we can't even anticipate, right? All of these things, there's an order, in a natural order to things. There's a natural order to the zodiac. There's a natural order to our lives, to our life cycles, all of these things. So, it's a great week this week to kind of get yourself going in a new direction. And we also end, next week we have the solstice. I'll probably do a separate video just for the solstice, because I think it deserves some individual attention, especially this year. But one of the things I want to say is that, if you're interested in studying with me, I have on my website 3 courses that I offer. The first course is my Foundations of Astrology, where we basically build and go through the entire zodiac so you can learn all the basics of your natal chart. And then anyone who enrolls in that class gets access to my live practice classes, where I will actually break down your natal chart and the aspects in your chart that make uniquely, the expression of you in in a way that's really helpful and helps you to integrate understanding of your own natal chart. Even if you had a reading with me, it's a great class series to go through if you're interested in learning more about astrology. And then if you've completed Foundations of Astrology, if you've done that course with me, you have access beginning this year to be in my live practice classes. On a monthly basis, I'll be offering 3 time slots to kind of accommodate all the different time zones. One for Australia, later East Coast, afternoon, evening time, and then 2 morning times, which also cover Europe and Pacific Coast time zones. So 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and a 4 o'clock time slot. And these practice classes allow for you to work on anything with me in your natal chart. If you've already gone through one of my class series, you can sign up just for the monthly membership so that you can just access any of those practice classes. You can bring forward your chart in the class. Each class will be dedicated to working on whatever aspects you're wanting to. So if you're in my Love Evolution class series, we're focusing on Venus and Pluto dynamics. And we would bring forward every single month different aspects of Venus and Pluto together so that you can learn how to apply that to your own natal chart. It's a really fun, interactive way where I kind of coach you through how to learn about your chart and how to apply what is happening in real time. And that all of those practice classes begin in January. For anyone who's signing up for a course that I'm offering right now, you get included access to the practice class for January. And then you can certainly, once you've completed one of my courses, join me in the monthly practice classes and show up as much as you like, to practice with me, to look at your natal chart, to continue to deepen your knowledge. And then in March, I'll be offering Foundations Level 2, which will go into synastry between two charts and family dynamics, relationship dynamics. We're going to go deeper into the karmic and evolutionary cycles that are unfolding within two people, two charts together, whether it's parents and children, whether it's romantic partners, whether it's business partners, and anyone who's completed my Foundations 1 or has significant experience in evolutionary astrology already is welcome to join me in Foundations Level 2. So I hope that you will take a look on my website. There's a new courses page that outlines all 3 courses. If you're interested or have any questions, feel free to let me know. I would love to be learning together. That's one of the ways that we can resolve the Jupiter Mercury stuff, gathering more information, learning more, learning together. And it's always a deeply healing experience in my class containers. The way we learn together is really special. So I hope you'll join me. I hope you have a beautiful week ahead. If there's anything in this video that caught your attention or touched your heart, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you're new here. I put out a weekly video every week on the week ahead, and I also do free classes throughout the year and special reports. So I recently did a special report on the Mars retrograde. You can watch that video on my channel. And I hope that you guys have a beautiful and blessed week. Bye for now, my friends.